Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Markle, the Interim Executive Director of the Barrie Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to thank you for joining the Barrie Chamber today for this session on archetypes in branding. Before I get started, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about a couple things that are coming up. Accelerate Summit is coming up from October 20th to the 23rd. It's an online format this year, only $50. Members can save 20% with our discount code. 4 days of educational, inspirational speakers to help you work on your business, choose the sessions you want to attend, and build your own adventure. So just contact us, and we'll give you that discount code for Chamber members. In a COVID world, speaking to your customers with sincerity and authenticity is more important than ever. Archetypes are universally familiar character types that transcend time, place, culture, gender, and age. They are hardwired into our psyche. We inherently know them, and it's in this presentation, Paul Larche will introduce you to archetypes, explain how they work, and how you can use them to find your authentic voice. I'll introduce you to our expert in just a second, and then we'll go directly to our Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A button. Please use that to submit your questions rather than the chat. The chat we can use throughout the afternoon if you have other things, but as far as questions are concerned, please put them there. So I'm happy to welcome our expert today, Paul Larche. Paul's been here several times in the past on different topics and is always a great presenter. Paul is the president and CEO of Larche Communications, Inc., a media company and digital branding agency, and has been working in the broadcasting and marketing business for over 40 years. His P6 branding framework strategy has been implemented by several companies from startups to multinational. Paul remains an entrepreneur at heart and is an active angel investor with investments in 10 companies to date. So we'll proceed with our presentation. We get about 20 minutes, but welcome, Paul, and nice to see you again, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's great to be here. So just so I stay on schedule, how long do you want this presentation to go?
So we've got about 20 to 30 minutes, and then 15 minutes of Q&A after that. So we'll filter the questions as they come in, but generally we like to stay on track and be no longer than an hour, start to finish with all the content.
All right. Well, this is terrific. Thanks, everyone. I hope everyone can see my screen. Paul, can you see it?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Okay, we're good to go. Terrific. Okay. Well, I'm happy to be chatting with you today about something that we use in our line of work when we're working with companies on branding. And it's particularly important this time in these days of COVID, as brands are trying to maybe reinvent themselves, rediscover themselves, or just making sure that they are going to be positioning themselves, for this new normal. And what I'm going to be talking about today is just a technique that is used a lot in branding and marketing. Some of you may have heard it before. I certainly did not invent this. There's several books out there. A lot of this comes from research from Carl Jung, who if you follow psychology, you would know, but there's several books about it. But I'm going to give you a little taste of it today, and maybe it'll be able to help you in some of your messaging. So with that, I will first of all just start by saying, we often ask people, what is a brand? And a brand really is what your customer says you are. And, the question I like to ask right off the top is, okay, like, who are you if you were a person? So archetypes are grounded in psychology, and they are universally familiar character types that transcend time and place and culture and gender and age. They've been around forever. They're pretty much hardwired into our psyche, and we inherently know them even as children. They just kind of make sense to us. And by choosing an archetype that best represents your company's values, or what people would expect from your target customer, it will make your brand more authentic, and it'll connect it on a much deeper level. The other thing is to think about archetypes as kind of your brand's personality. It should be predictable and consistent with your customer's expectation, and it also helps avoid what we call brand multiple personality disorder, which again we see very often as a common branding mistake, where your voice out there to your customer seems to be coming from different directions. So archetypes, what they really do is they affect customer motivation by providing really what's an intangible experience of meaning, but it's meaning with integrity, and this really will compel brand loyalty. And if you apply the power of archetypes to creatively and intuitively resolve brand inconsistencies, it really can act as a beacon to direct all of your branding and marketing efforts, both internally and externally. So most successful brands have a predominant archetype, and sometimes they have a complementary or a secondary archetype. And this will make more sense in a minute when I go over them with you. And sometimes the brand's archetype can transform over time. And I'll give some examples of that because as a company evolves over time, how they want to position themselves in a market may mean that they may have to look at doing or using a different archetype. But for a lot of small businesses, typically they remain the same. There's 12 archetypes. They fall into 4 groups, which are based on the target's needs and their pain points, which we'll talk about. So I'm hoping you can see the screen here, these archetypes. These are the 12 of them. And again, they're broken into 4 different categories. And what I'm going to do today over the next 20 minutes or so is go over these relatively quickly, and I'll give you a few examples because then I'd love to have an opportunity to answer some questions for you if you have any. So with that, we're going to start with the top section of it, which is called the stability and control archetypes. And within that is the creator, the caregiver, and the ruler. The motivations for these types of target customers is it helps people feel safe and in control. These are customers that are looking for structure. And the pain points for this type of customer is they don't like chaos. They don't like anything that has to do with ruin, decline, obviously ill health. That's why caregiver falls within here. So with that, I'll go over the 3 of them. The creator archetype. Creator brands really help people tap into their potential, to really bask into their creations and dreams. And they're defined by imagination, curiosity, limitless vision, artistry, and passion. They're inventors and groundbreakers. Their brand promise is imagination. Their motto for creators is, if you can imagine it, it can be done. And often they're known as artists or inventors or innovators, musicians, writers, even dreamers. So I'll give you a few examples, and some might not be as evident as you think. Home Depot. Home Depot is a creator brand. And you might ask, well, how is that? Well, what Home Depot tries to help you do is to create your own vision of what you want to do in your house. And it could be from painting to redecorating to building something. But certainly for the average customer, the way they brand themselves is as a creator brand. I'm going to reference Apple a lot through this just because they're a great company to reference, but also these are one of the companies that have changed over the course of time with their, depending on where they were in their evolution, to talk about what archetype they were. And certainly in the late 90s, when Steve Jobs came back, they really positioned themselves as a creator brand with the Think Different campaign. And you can see some of the artwork that, if you were around back then, might look a little familiar to you. Anything that has to do with art, art stores, creative endeavors will fall again within creative brands. Caregiver brands are exactly what they sound like. They provide comfort, protection. They're selfless, they're compassionate, dutiful, benevolent. All of those things fall into what the caregiver brand is. The promise from caregiver brands is to help others. The motto is to love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. And they're also known as the protector or saint or altruist or parent, supporter, humanitarian sometimes. And again, I'll give you some examples. Caregiver brands. Campbell's Soup is a very much a caregiver brand in the sense that it's like it makes you feel comfortable. It brings you back to your childhood, and they use a lot of that as your comfort food. Michelin Tires is a Caregiver brand. They rarely talk about, what the tire specs are, but they do talk about so much more is riding on your tire because of the safety that they bring for their brand. Anything that has to do with healthcare is often in this Caregiver brand. And here's a few others: Shoppers Drug Mart, even the cooperators. A lot of insurance are considered Caregiver brands. Volvo with safety, GE. Again, just some examples. And then the final of the top three is the Ruler. And Ruler brands are the authoritative, the confident, the high achieving brands. They're the ones that people look to for leadership. They inspire respect and success, and their promise is power. If you work with a Ruler brand, and their motto is "Power isn't everything; it's the only thing." And again, they're often referred to as the leader, the boss, the king, the queen, the role model, anything that has to do with being in a leading position. And again, you don't have to think too much to think of some of the brands that would be considered Ruler brands in their category. Mercedes-Benz, for example, certainly within the automobile industry. Here's a few others: Microsoft, Rolex, and I mean, some of them even use, you use Rolex, you see the crown, right in their logo as a Ruler brand. Cadillac is another one, and my favorite, Crown Royal. There's a crown from Henry the Eighth and William the First, and Mike from Dallas. So, great Ruler brand. The next category are called belonging and enjoyment, and there's three that fall into this: the Jester, the regular guy, gal, and the lover. So we'll go over those three. Their motivations, by the way, is they want to feel love and they want to feel community. They want to feel like they're part of something that has to do with other people. Their pain points is they don't want to be alone. They don't want to be abandoned, orphaned, exiled, however you want to put it. They want to be part of something that's a bigger community. So we'll start with the Jester. The Jester is exactly what it kind of sounds like. They're typically fun, silly, spontaneous. They like to live in the moment. Sometimes they advocate not taking things too seriously. And really enjoying, the joys of life. There's a lot of very successful Jester brands. Some people don't want to be a Jester brand, but there's nothing wrong with it as long as that's where you stay. Their promise is to have a laugh, and their motto is "You only live once." And they're also known as the Joker, the comedian, the trickster. And again, I'll give you some big brands that you would know. Things like Geico or Kudo are Jester brands in the characters that they use, and many brands use either an animal or a character, and usually they're silly. M&M have been using the Jester brand positioning for a long time. Probably the poster child for Jester brand is Old Spice, especially when you consider the backstory here, where Old Spice was really a really tired old brand that had really depleted in sales, and then when they came out with the Old Spice guy, it became one of the most successful brands around, and it was all tied around being a Jester brand. And something more recently, I'm not sure if any of you have seen any of the Rona commercials, but they've really adopted this. And this is the Rona dancing construction guy, but they have a bunch of other ones, and they're doing a really good job with the Jester brand, positioning themselves that way. Don't take life too seriously. Regular guy, gal is probably one of the more common archetypes. And it is, like I said, what the title is, very mainstream. These are people that like to belong. They're team players. They're approachable. They're neighborly. They're empathetic. Their promise is they just want to belong. Their motto is all men and women are created equal. And they're also known as just good citizens, the common man, common woman, the good neighbor. And again, a very safe brand to be, or archetype to be in, particularly if that's who your target customer is. And again, the poster child here would be Walmart. Walmart is, save money, live better every day, low prices. Visa, Ford would fall into that category, very mainstream. In terms of fast food, Wendy's, they still use Dave, who passed away 20 years ago, but he's the guy next door, who cooks things up very fresh. Today, of course, in our marketplace, Tim Hortons is a very much a regular guy gal brand, and they talk about serving their communities. And Facebook would be, again, an ultimate brand for everybody's on Facebook. I mean, everybody's on Facebook. And what do you do with Facebook? It's a community. It's a community with your friends and old friends and new friends. So great way they position the brand. Then Lover is exactly what it sounds like. They exude intimacy, sensual pleasure. They're sexy, passionate. They have sensory appeal. They tend to be beautifully designed. Sometimes they really try to appear for people who need or belong. The promise is connection, and the motto is "You're the only one." And they also are known as passionate, intimate, sensualists. Anything that falls into that would be considered a Lover brand. And again, examples, Haagen-Dazs, I'm sure you've seen some of theirs. Anything that has to do with, Victoria's Secrets, that category. I'm not sure how I want to position that and stay G-rated, but I think you know what I mean. Calvin Klein jeans, it works for the men and the women, but this is the way they position it. Almost anything, again, that has to do with cosmetics, not all, but certainly some, really use that as a way to position their brand. And here's a few others for you that would probably seem self-evident. So we're now at the bottom of the circle, and I'm sorry I'm going a little fast, but I want to get all of these in so I can answer questions for you. Risk and mastery is the next three, and in there you have, again, three archetypes: the magician, the hero, and the outlaw. So their motivations are to achieve, and their fears are to be ineffectual or to be powerless, not being able to achieve. The opposite of that they want to achieve, they want to make something happen, and that falls into this category. So we'll start with the outlaw. The outlaws are the rebels. They're discontent with the status quo, or that's the way they position themselves. They actively confront, disrupt, or even overthrow the norm to fix it. They view rebellion as a productive and progressive way to do business. Promise is revolution. Rules are made to be broken. It could be their motto. And they're also, again, known as the rebel or the revolutionary, the misfit, the iconoclast, however you want to put it. Again, some examples. The poster child is Harley Davidson. It makes the 45-year-old accountant feel like a badass when they put their leathers on and take their Harley out and feel like a rebel. Virgin, all the Virgin brands with Sir Richard really started out as outlaw brands. They're very unconventional and came out of left field to go after some of the big brands in the world, Mobil, airlines, and very much as an outlaw brand. I'm going to talk about Apple again here because now we have to go way back to 1984, or when they launched the Mac. Apple was a very, very small company. They were up against IBM was the big brand back then. And, these are some pictures from their famous 1984 commercial, which launched the Macintosh. And just to bring this up to today, Fortnite, which is a company that just had a falling out with Apple, just did a rebrand of that commercial using their characters, and it's gotten millions and millions of hits. So it's still very relevant. But Apple's the big company now, and these are the outlaws. These are the scrappy ones trying to fight Apple. The hero brand. Again, sounds exactly like what it is. They're fearless, purposeful, focused, tenacious. They're like superheroes. They want you to, right wrongs, be honorable, fair, and be all that you can be. The promise is triumph, to win. And the motto is, where there's a will, there's a way. And again, they could be known as the warrior, the crusader, the rescuer, the soldier, the winner, the champion, however you want to put it. And a lot of hero brands out there. These will all make sense to you, but Nike, again, is the quintessential hero brand. Find your greatness, just do it. Red Bull, very successful in just trying to, get everything you can out of life. MEC, probably not the best example today because I think they're bankrupt or going bankrupt, unfortunately, due to COVID, but very much trying to push people to be the best that they can be. And again, here's a few others. Anything that has to do with armed forces obviously would fall into that. Gatorade. FedEx is, absolutely positively has to get there overnight. They've always positioned themselves as the hero brand. Magician brand is a very interesting one as well. And these are brands that feel that they can transform. They often are considered to be innovators or catalysts for change, and they make sometimes dreams come true. And it could be real, or it can just be in a fantasy world. But the promise is to transform, and the motto is to turn your dreams into reality. And again, they may be referred to as visionaries or catalysts or inventors. That falls under the magician brand. And some examples of that, and again, this is the third time I'm going to use Apple, but like again, Apple through its history has positioned themselves well using archetypes, and they've used it at the right time in their evolution. And when Apple did really become known as being the company that can put out some great products back in the early 2000s, and it started with the iPod and then the iPhone, and being able to put a laptop into a manila envelope. I mean, these things were, they were considered like magic when we first saw them. They were, that's the way they were positioned, and they did a great job at it. This one, you can say it's a cross between a Jester and a magic, but Axe is always, being we can transform you into a solid hunk. Disney World, anything that has to do with that type of entertainment is considered, magical brands, magic brands. And here's a few others. Intel Inside, it's Intel, it's like inside, it's magic. It makes your computer run really fast. MasterCard, only, certain things are priceless. For everything else, there's MasterCard. And Oil of Olay is, it can take a few years off you. So it's a magic, they position it as a magic brand. And then the final three are what we call independence and fulfillment. And the three here are explorer, sage, and innocent. And the motivations for this group is to help people feel good and find happiness, for lack of a better term. They don't want to feel like they're entrapped. They don't want to feel empty or restless. They want to feel like, okay, I'm in a good place. And let's break them down. Innocent. Innocent brands promote happiness, harmony, fulfillment, sometimes just life's simple pleasures. They are optimistic, they're pure and wholesome, sometimes cheerful, really even childlike in some ways, but they really try to promote just being in a good place. The promise is really to be happy. And their motto is you're free to be you and me, be comfortable in your own skin. And, sometimes they're called utopian or optimists, dreamers. Again, some of the most powerful brands out there fall into that category. And again, the poster child would be Coke. Coke has always positioned himself as open happiness. Happiness is in a bottle. And however they've positioned themselves as, Coke is making you happy, is happiness. Others are, Dove did a great campaign with, again, being comfortable in your skin and just being innocent and not worrying about what other people think. McDonald's would be an innocent brand as well. You know, smiley faces, I'm loving it. You know, trying to position themselves as that innocent, you know, come to a happy place type place. And here's a few others for you. So a lot of innocent type brands out there. The next one would be called Sage, and a Sage, again, very descriptive. They have knowledge. They're there to enrich the world, and they're often referred to as mentors or teachers. They're intelligent, sometimes analytical. They seek the truth. Their promise is wisdom. That, you know, if you have a brand where you want to be known for being smart and wise, this is it. The truth will set you free is their motto, and they're also known as the scholar, the expert, the advisor, the professional, the philosopher, academic. Anything that falls into that, anything that has to do with academic, certainly falls into that area. And I skipped one. Oprah would certainly be considered a Sage brand for people who follow her, but the poster child again for Sage brands would be Google. Google now is where we go to find anything out, and it's right at our fingertips. But also anything that has to do with the financial side of business, investing. You want to make sure that you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're talking about. And so many of them position themselves as being experts in that area. And then here's some other examples. Any news department, you know, would want to, again, be known as a wise Sage brand. Accountant departments, TripAdvisor, they even use an owl as part of their, you know, their positioning. So these are great examples of Sage brands. Then the Explorer brand. The Explorer brand, again, is very descriptive. It's new experiences, people that like freedom and independence, and they want to discover the world. They're daring, and they're always looking to make new discoveries. The promise there is freedom. The motto is "Don't fence me in." And they could be also known as the seeker or the wanderer, the individualist, the pilgrim. Examples of Explorer brands would be anything that has to do with outdoors. North Face, again, anything that has to do with the outdoors would certainly fall into that. But even, you know, Levi's, for example, have always tried to position that brand as an Explorer brand, rugged, outdoor, you know, even, you know, down to earth, however you want to put it. But that's the way they position it. You know, here's some others. You know, Jeep is a great Explorer brand. You can go anywhere you want. Coleman, Cabela's, you know, anything that, like I said, has to do with outdoors would definitely fall into that. So those are the 12, and I've gone through them in about 25 minutes here. I went through them a lot faster than I usually do because I wanted to leave a little bit of opportunity for discussion. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about, because I went through this pretty fast, you're probably saying, well, I'm not sure how I can really use this. I have a free, no obligation gift for you that I'll talk about in a second, a PDF that you can use, and I'll show you how to use it. But again, I want to go back to how I started. If you look at these 12, all of these 12 should feel very familiar to you, and it doesn't matter what age you are, how old you are, your culture, you know, and this could have been just as relevant 100 years ago as it is today. These are just universal archetypes. But when you decide to pick one, because it best reflects who would connect with your customer, and you try to stay in that area in the way you communicate, over time, what it does is it just creates a feeling that, okay, I know this person, I know their personality, they are who they say they are, and there's no right or wrong one. They're all equally just as good. But again, what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be positioning yourself as a hero brand one day, and then as a creator brand the next day, and then as a jester the next day. That is where people have it's not a conscious, but it's a subconscious feeling of unease that I'm not really sure I trust these people because I'm not sure who they are. They're really kind of all over the place. So again, it's always good to decide where you are and pick that, and then stick with it in terms of how you do all of your communication. I'm going to talk right now, then we'll open it up for question about this archetype detector. This is a PDF that we've put together, and I'll show you more about it in a second. But really, and I'm going to make it available to Julie. And if you want a copy of it, you can send an email to Julie or Paul, and they'll send it to you, and I'll show you how to use it. But really, it's a questionnaire. There's 10 questions, and each question has up to 12 answers. And once you fill these out, it will automatically do some math for you, and it will tell you a couple of things. One, it'll tell you what archetype you probably consider yourself to be, and then it will give you also your probably your second highest archetype. And then it'll also give you a page with information on each of those on how to use that as a brand. And I'll show you how to use it in a second. But the other thing that's just about as important is that when you fill this out, if you look at your score and you notice that your score is all over the place, that says that you have to go back and do it again, because you're trying to be everything to everybody, and smart brands just don't do that and can't do that. So I think I'm still sharing my screen here. Can anybody correct me if I'm wrong? Is it still?
Yep, you're still sharing.
Okay, so I just brought up this PDF, and like I said, I'll share this with Julie. But essentially, you'll see here, it's just a 3-page PDF, and it will ask you a question, and our organization most highly values employees who are, and then you would go through the list: trustworthy, independent, intelligent, hardworking, resourceful, catalyst for change, down to earth, lovable, fun, caring. And what we're asking you to do is to try to only pick one answer. So you might think, well, I'm all of these things. Well, which one are you the most, or which one do you think would represent the organization or the values of the employees that much? Then the next question is, our organization prides itself on, and then again, there's a list: keeping people safe, a sense of adventure, making a difference in the world. I'm not going to go over all these, obviously, but what happens is you go through these and you would just click on, okay, that one here, this one here, this one here, this one on this question, this one on this, and I'm just obviously picking these here at random. And I've gone down to question 10. And now what will happen is this page will automatically populate, and it's saying that based on your score, and this is the score shows up here, I picked 3 that were innocent, 2 that were sage, and 1. And often this is not, the best of scores. You want something to kind of stand out a little bit more, hopefully like 4 or 5. But even if this was what I thought I was, then you can click on this button that says your primary view. And what it's added here is a page that gives you the information on the innocent brand. And then you can click on give me the secondary view, and then it'll add a second page. And in this case, it was the sage. And then you can save that and use it. I'll make this available. I want just to remind you that this is our form, our company's form, and we prefer if you didn't send it all over the world, but we want to make it available to you, and hopefully it can help you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll get off my screen sharing and pass it back on to Paul or Julie.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Paul. I mean, you think about those brands when you look at them and you don't really understand, where they came from, but it makes a lot of sense when you describe it the way you have. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for the tool. That's something that I think a lot of our members could make good use of. And there is a question here that says, I want to use an external company to handle my social media. So, we'll obviously refer those people back to Larche in some way, shape, or form. But we've got about 11 questions in here, and some of them may be repetitive. We'll try to bundle them as best we can, but let's get going from this standpoint. Sure. We've got about 20 minutes left.
I can see the questions here, Paul. Do you want me to go through them, or do you?
Well, I'll ask you the questions, and then I'll clear them off as we go. So,
okay.
So should I be choosing my archetype for branding based on my products or services, or on my customer, or on my values? Also, if these three don't match up, do I have a problem?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. Yes, if your values don't match up with your customer's values, you've got a problem right off the bat. We always tell people when they're, particularly when they're filling out that form, the form will ask you a couple of times from your customer's perspective and from your organization's perspective. It should be a combination of both, but if you had to default to one, you really want to be in line with what your customer expects of you. So right. If your customer is looking for someone who is going to, let them be all that they can be and the best of their abilities, then that hero brand might make sense for you. So customer I would say come first. But if it, if you're not putting out something that your customer wants, you're going to have a problem. And if it's not lined up with your company values, you got a problem.
Right. Right. So that makes lots of sense. We've got a question here from one of our members that says, I've had to change many things or so many things about my business to survive COVID. At what point do I rebrand my company, or do I stay with my original brand so I'm familiar? And what should I consider when making the decision? Well, obviously, we've talked about a lot of things that would go into making the decision, but the timing of it, is COVID the right time to start playing around with your brand?
Well, if you have a well-established brand and you speak with one voice and you're consistent, then stick with it. Absolutely, that consistency is the name of the game in branding. But if you find that if you look back at your messaging, what you put out on social media, what your website says, any marketing or advertising you've done, and if you see that, the messages could fall into 3 or 4 of those archetypes, then you might want to say, you know what, maybe we should kind of pick our beachfront and say, this is how we're gonna communicate, because that will over time make you more authentic. And again, there's no one that's better than another, but I wouldn't change it if you're already doing this. And a lot of companies are intuitively already doing this. Like the Chamber of Commerce, we know what the Chamber of Commerce is. We know what they do speak with a consistent voice. This is not an issue for them per se. And I'm just pulling that out of the air, but I hope that answers the question. Yeah,
absolutely. So with that in mind, sort of in talking about making some adjustments, do I need to choose just one archetype to focus on my brand, or should I be taking elements of all three in a category that fit you best? Because in like a quadrant system, are there complementary archetypes?
There are complementary ones. You don't have to all stay in one, because your customer can have, they can have different pain points, and then they can also have different different things that they're looking for. So we say pick one and try to stick with it, because unless you have a lot of time and effort and money to market, to do more than one is going to cost you, a lot. Some brands are so big and they go after different, they segment. And again, I'll use McDonald's as an example. I mean, they're going after kids, they're going after seniors, they're going after families, they're going after teenagers, and each one of those, they'll use a bit of a different approach, but they're big enough to be able to do that. But if you're a small business, your best bet is to say, I'm going to be a Sage brand, or a Caregiver brand, and that's the arena I'm going to play in.
Yeah, and again, talk from a McDonald's, because my background's there. When you go to conventions and they start talking about the upcoming year and what marketing is looking like, they literally will say to you, this is how we're marketing this year, and this is why we're doing it, and then they'll show you examples. So that even from the store level, you know exactly what it is they're going after, so you can position it properly in restaurants and be able to speak to it when asked questions. Very well thought through. Yeah. So I got a question here from, well, actually a comment as well from Dawn Mucci, who's one of our favorite members, and she says, "Hi, Paul. Really enjoyed your talk. I love your studio. If you identify yourself as a particular archetype, say the caring type, is there a particular marketing or advertising platform you want to focus your advertising spend on?"
Well, again, this would come back to who your target customer is. You want to focus your marketing and advertising on where you will find who your target customer is. And you can be a caregiver brand, but a caregiver brand can offer care. I'll give an example. We did some rebranding with Hospice Barrie, and they're very much a caregiver brand, but their audience, they have two different types of customers. One, unfortunately, probably doesn't want to be there, but the family is the other customer. What we would do there is we would say, how is it best to reach those people? And in some cases, it might be through doctors and hospitals. So that's very specific, but it's just an example of how you would do it. Whereas you could have another caregiver brand that could be going after a younger type of population, and maybe social media would make more sense for that, or a combination of a few. It's probably beyond the scope of this presentation, but certainly once you've picked an archetype, you have to know your target customers intimately, everything there is to know about them. You want to make sure it's as narrow as possible, and then companies like ours, but there's a lot of others out there, can help you to say, here's the most efficient, effective way to reach that particular group. Right.
So here's one that's a little sort of off what we've been normally talking about. Is there a significance to the colorization of the wheel?
No.
No? It's just, it looks pretty.
No.
Okay. All right. Sometimes you get colors that are associated with feelings, I guess. So
no, like I said, if you do a Google search on archetypes, there's a lot of stuff. Some of them call the names a little differently. There was a book that came out on this about 15, 20 years ago, which is kind of the authority on it, but there's several books on it. And again, like I said, we've used it because it's a good, particularly with clients who are speaking from different voices, and they don't even really know that they're doing it, or they're certainly not doing it on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
They just don't really do it until they look back and they go, oh, okay, well, this message was coming from this type. And again, if you think of it from just a human, psychology point of view, people get confused. Like, who is this person?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to stick to, that rebel brand. Like, Donald Trump is the epitome of that. Like, love him or hate him. Politics, this is just as important too. Like, which archetype are you going to play in? But, go against the grain, fight it. Like, it's just, but stick with it. And he's consistent with it,
Yeah. Wish he wasn't, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that is a guy who's like, so like, even with everything that's happened over the last few days, he's so consistent with that rebel archetype.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So here's a question about this more relevant to these days. I recently moved my company online. I'm working on building social platforms. How can I have consistency in online branding when the internet is so overwhelming and time consuming? Are certain platforms more important than others? I think we've talked about this in several other times where certain social media platforms suit themselves better, but in terms of an archetype, is there one that fits better?
Well, again, without knowing who the target customer is, it's hard to say. Facebook, in general would probably be for people over the age of 30, and Instagram in general could be, under the age of 30, and, TikTok would probably be under the age of 20. And so, there's general categories there. But a good website, when we talk about archetypes too, everything from the colors you use to the fonts you use to the just the general layout can tell a lot about what archetype you are in your brand, pretty quickly. And if it doesn't, if it's, if you look at it and it's a generic type website, then you're really not coming from any voice,
Yeah.
You go to any of these big brands we talked about, you go to their website and they'll be pushing their archetype.
Right. So it can get, and obviously it gets very expensive, and there's a lot of digital Main Street happening right now where you've got $5,000 grants, and you'd be able to build something out, with limited funds. You're not always going to get to exactly where you want to go. Should be part of your long-term planning to continue to invest in that, and I would suggest that it's probably best to do that with a company you can grow with, for sure. Okay. So here's one. This might be Todd Tuckey lying in the works, but being in construction for the past 30 years, I've always done business with only a handshake and referrals. Okay, well, I know that's not Todd. Very is changing. I'm feeling the urgency to be branded and start marketing. Where do I even begin?
Well, again, the first question I always say is it depends on who your target customer is. I mean, you could be a contractor. Are you commercial? Are you residential? First of all, you're in a great business to be in today. I mean, that the business is doing great. But if it's more residential and you're more of an independent, you work with an architect, not an archetype, an architect, then your messaging might be, you want to be a regular guy, gal. That's who you're looking for is. But if you want to be industrial and you might want to be known as the sage because you're the expert, like in that category. So it could, or you could be a hero brand in construction and say we build things that nobody else has ever built before. We can, there's no idea that's off limits, and let's dream this together. So it depends on who your target is and who you're going after.
So it seems like the form or the PDF that you presented sort of gives you the ability to kind of create a gut feeling very quickly with just a little bit of information to give a general idea of where your brain sits in terms of where your company's at, and then build it out from there with some data. It may change, I would imagine, as you investigate that a little bit deeper.
For sure, and often people there's a reset button on that form, so if you fill it out and you go, well, that's not working, just hit reset, try it again. But also, if you have a few employees, get them to fill it out, or if you have a couple of friends who know your business, or your spouse, it's what we do, we have an electronic version of this that we'll send out to, when we're working with a company, we will send out this to as many stakeholders as we can. And sometimes we even include some of their customers. If they tell us, if they have a relationship with certain customers that are prepared to share like we want their perception of what they think. And what we'll do is we'll aggregate that type of questionnaire. It's a little bit more sophisticated, there's a little bit more to it. But we'll aggregate that into a total score. And then what we'll do is we'll look and we'll come back to them and say, well, here's how your customers perceive you. Here's how you perceive yourself. Here's how your employees perceive yourself. And if they're all in line, then this is great. But if they're not, then you have some decisions to make. Yeah,
for sure. So here's a fun one. How hard is it to shift my brand messaging? Do I ease into it, or do I do a quick about face? For example, I'm trying to switch from joker to ruler. How do I do this and be taken seriously? Rip the Band-Aid off.
That's quite the switch.
Yeah.
I guess the question I would ask is, why are you wanting to switch? Because again, the joker, the jester, is it's an area that some brands stay in forever. I mean, there's some that always do, like M&Ms and stuff, and some will it's a complementary thing. And I would probably say Rona is not a jester brand per se, but I think this is probably a complementary they're probably more in line with what Home Depot is, which is a creator brand. You go there to build things and to, create things. You're creating stuff.
Right.
But you can dabble into those on occasion and it won't seem completely out of character. And that's an example of where you can have a secondary one. Canadian Tire's done it a few times too, where they went for a long time of having their kind of the Scrooge guy, especially at Christmas time, and it was more of a Jester type thing, but it worked very well for them.
So taking a couple of maybe campaigns that you've got running and throwing it in a different style to kind of shake things up isn't bad. It lets you know whether people are paying attention, which is good, and adds a bit of fun into your company.
And again, depending on what you're doing, your budget, some companies will work with, if we're looking after some of their messaging and their social media, we'll A/B test, we can see how quickly things are opened, if they're opened at all, where they tended to look, how long they were on it, all of those things. And over time, we can fine tune it to make sure that, okay, this is the message that's resonating the best.
Yep. Speaking of the testing, we just had something in the chat box when somebody's saying they never liked the Canadian Tire guy. So there you go. It doesn't always work for everyone.
Their investors did, though.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure, because it certainly helped them. So another question from somebody we know: should my secondary archetype be close to the main archetype on the wheel? Is it a bad thing that they're completely opposite on the wheel?
No, they don't. There's nothing that says they have, as long as it reflects the values of your customers. Your customers can be looking for a ruler, and they can be looking for somebody that has a bit of a sense of humor at the same time. It probably doesn't sound like it goes together, and I probably wouldn't recommend those two, but it doesn't have to be in the same quadrant. You could certainly be a creator brand and a magician brand. They're not that far apart. Good.
Okay. What is my problem?
I'm just going to say there's some that don't go together for sure. You certainly wouldn't want to have a Sage brand and an Outlaw brand, as your secondary, because they contradict each other. The Sage is stability, wisdom, and things never change,
Right.
So there's some that are obvious, but some others it would just depend. The best thing is to check out your score, get a few other people to do it, and see what comes up.
Yeah, and see what pops up in there. What if my product is good for everyone, and they're all in my target market? Won't I be excluding people by sticking with one specific group?
That is that particular sentence is the one we hear the most over time. And I go back to my radio career working with advertisers, and often it's a big red flag if you think everybody's your customer and you're worried about excluding everybody, because you can't speak with one voice to everybody. People look at the world differently. Obviously there's the generational thing, but which is obvious, but beyond that, you can have people within the same generation that look at the world completely different. Their politics can be different. And if the more you try to be as open and as possible, the less effective you're going to be, because you're going to be so bland because you're trying not to offend or hurt anybody that your message isn't going to cut. You have to find out who your customer is, what their values are, what's important to them, what's their pain points, what's their joy points, and then focus your message on that, to the exclusion, believe it or not, of everything else. The more focused you are, the better you're going to do. We've seen it a million times.
That's great advice for sure. So another question with regards to timing. So how often should I be reviewing my brand actions to be sure that I'm still coming across as authentic? So is it an annual review every campaign, or is it based on metrics and results? And what should I be asking myself in this type of review? I think I know what your answer is, but it's one of those things where if it's not broke, don't fix it. But sometimes it may be broken, you don't realize it. So a review is not a bad thing.
Sure. Well, again, that's why this questionnaire is good, because if your answer comes back different from the way you're communicating, then that might indicate that there's an issue. You might want to do a little bit more research on that. But by and large, I mean, most, especially small businesses, which I assume most of us are here, you probably have a good sense if your brand is working or not. I mean, if your sales are going down, you know, your brand's not working.
Yeah.
You know, I'm being a little facetious here, but you know, because we're in crazy times. But I think that if you're, you know, speaking with a unified voice and your customers feel like they understand you, then your brand's in good shape.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You know, I guess I had a train of thought and I've lost it. Here we go. I'm showing my age. It'll come back to me before we get through here. Archetype, shall we choose? Yep, and we've already answered that question. So if I want to use an external company to handle my social media, what kind of questions should I be asking them to ensure that they'll reflect my brand in the best way if I hire them?
That's a great question. You know, I think there's a lot of companies that do it out there, but I think probably the first question you'd ask is, how do you think I should be communicating with to my target customer? And if they can't tell you some of the stuff that we're telling you, then you probably wouldn't want to be dealing with them right off the bat. The thing with social media is, I mean, people can even do it themselves. It's just time consuming. Companies that do it for you, you know, they can do one of two things. They can just fill out the forms for you, or they can do the background work. And the customers we tend to deal with, we want to do the background work first, because we want to make sure that whatever message we're going to put across is going to work for them. And you know, we're not a fit for everybody. You know, we're probably more expensive than most, but we want to do a lot of that background research, like we've talked about before we go forward. But there are companies out there that'll, you know, if you have a, you know, relatively good brand, you're speaking with a pretty consistent voice, and you just want them to go out there and do it, there's several companies out there that can help you. Yeah,
for sure. And I just want to reiterate that when we talk about branding, you know, a lot of confusion out there sometimes with that, meaning we're going to change our logos and colors and all that kind of stuff. And that's not necessarily your brand. That's a part of it, I would imagine. But
yep.
Sometimes that's the last thing you want to change, because you've got that recognition that's out there. So, you know, how often would you suggest that somebody actually takes a look at what their logo looks like? The Chamber made a change a few years back, which I think was positive. It's not always obvious to people what it is, but you know, the colors and the way that we've been able to stay with that have been very helpful. So what would your suggestions be on that visual side of things?
Well, we'll always tell people, you know, don't change your logo unless you really have a good reason to do it. Now, there's often good reasons to do it. Sometimes logos can look dated because at the time they were made, could have been, you know, your cousin or your nephew that put it together for you. And, you know, the way, you know, the fonts and stuff like that just don't look like they fit today. Or, you know, it could be a graphic or whatnot. And sometimes it is good to look at a change or an uplift. But when we're working with companies, we'll either, you know, the part of the audit we do on their brand is to find out, you know, where it's at in its evolution. And if it does need some updating, you know, if you look at big, you know, companies we all know so well, some of the logos never change. They change every 30 or 40 or 50 years or very little. Yeah. So sometimes it's just a facelift. Your brand, you just needs maybe a, you know, a slight adjustment and just to make it look more contemporary. But just to bring it back to a brand, I think every company should, you know, certainly once a year should probably sit down and bring in a few stakeholders and say, okay, listen, you know, who's our customer? Do you think we're communicating well with them? Do you think they trust us with what we're saying? Are we getting through to them? And if not, then, you know, maybe we need some help. Yeah. Good advice. Absolutely. So, Paula, we're at 1 o'clock. I think I'm going to cut off. We only have one question left. So, and I'm pretty sure that we'd answer that question at some point through our talks. But thank you very much for coming today. We really appreciate your expertise. It's always great to have you here. Usually it's at a breakfast or a lunch and we get a room full of people and a bit of a meal, but I guess this will have to do in the interim. So, no, I'm happy to help.
Yeah, no, and we welcome it all the time. So in closing, thank you again for joining us and for the work that you're doing every day in your business. Thank you for the work that you've already done to flatten the curve and for your continued focus protecting our community. Please continue to shop local, supporting neighbors, families, and friends with your intentional purchasing choices. So the Chamber is here to help you through this. Please feel free to email or call us if you need something more. Please join us for our upcoming online session. So this Thursday, we have working towards remote learning success with your kids. So this is more of a mental health and sort of a discussion about the changing dynamics with our lockdowns, upcoming and restrictions in place still. So this is a panel conversation with Sue Cook from Family TLC, Arlinda Demiri from Scholarly Elite, and Michelle Capitan from Empower Simcoe. So a good conversation about what that you can do at home. We have our Chamber Chat networking session at 12 o'clock on October 14th. It's been very successful and it continues to evolve. We would love to see more people come out. Again, I'll reiterate the Accelerate Summit, October 20th to the 23rd, with an online format. It's $50, but if you put in the Chamber discount code, Chamber Love, all caps, you will get that 20% discount. So it's $40 for 4 days. Education, inspiration, money very well spent. We've got a great speaker lineup. I encourage you to go to the website. And on October 26th at noon is our annual general meeting. Always a very exciting and engaging meeting, tongue-in-cheek. It's usually our least exciting, but we'd like you to show up. Obviously, we are going to present our financials and please double check your membership status and make sure that you are eligible to participate and vote. And with that, I will say goodbye. Have a great weekend. Paul, we appreciate your time and effort, and please let us know if we can be of any help to you moving forward as well.
Terrific. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everybody.